Okay, so we'll start with the prayers before teachings. Page 8, the Heart Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on massive Vulture mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, or no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tayata Om Gati Gati Padagati Padasam Gati Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. And Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety along the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the 3 chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Sachadasana. Akasamara Sachadara Samara Yaki. Kayata, Gati, Gati, Padagati, Padasam, Gati, Bodhi, Soha. By the teachings of the 3 pink jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, May they be pacified. May they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here right now. Sachi po ki shu shin me to Mare Rabling Shi Ni Te Yen Body San Ye Ji Nu Me Te O Ye Tro Ko Namadag Shin Ho Chu Pa Shu Jetsu Lama Dam Ho Kinam Ichu Kukala Kien Se Chu Sin Chik Jita Sampe No Jishin Ma La Zat Ge Chukyi Chapa Tu Solidam Guratna Mandala Niviyatayami Sangi Churan Sagi Chonam Jangchu Pati Dabni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chenyen Gi Pesunam Ki Chola Panchu Sangi Drupa Shu Sangi Churan Sagi Chonam Jangchu Badu Dabni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chenyen Gi Pesunam Ki Chola Panchu Sangi Drupa Shu Sangi Churan Sagi Chonam Jangchu Badu Dabni Kyapsu Chi Nagi Chenyen Gi Pesunam Ki Chola Panchu Sangi Drupa Shu. And then setting our profound Mahayana motivation for engaging in listening to the teachings, reflecting, discussing, analyzing, contemplating, to gain the realizations of the great past masters, just as they have shown in our own mind stream. Okay, so today we're focusing in this journey through the Lam Rim, the graduated path to enlightenment, on the middle scope, the practice of the middle scope, the focus of the middle scope. So having been following the verses of the Lama Tsongkhapa's hymns of experience, there's actually just in that presentation, one quite profound verse that actually encapsulates or summarizes the practice of the middle scope practitioners. So I'll read that. If you do not put effort into contemplating true sufferings, the faults of cyclic existence, you will not develop the wish for liberation. If you do not contemplate true origins, the steps for entering cyclic existence, you will not understand how to cut the roots of cyclic existence. Therefore, rely on weariness, definite emergence from existence, and cherish the knowledge of what binds you to cyclic existence. I, a yogi, practice like this. You who desire liberation should do likewise. So remembering that this hymn of experience, this genre of hymns or songs or lines of experience coming out of the realizations of the author, the composer of the text, of Lama Tsongkhapa, of how to practice. So on the basis of refuge, as we discussed in relation to the small scope practice, we develop this unshakable faith in the qualities of the Buddha. Unshakable meaning it won't be overcome, you won't be swayed off onto other paths or to abandoning the path. And that faith is the basis of our Dharma practice. So when we train to develop those qualities in our own mind stream, that's the basis of our progress on the path, as it says, you know, I, a yogi, practice this way, you who desire liberation should do likewise. So advice for us what to do. So cultivating this mind of weariness, definite emergence. Many years ago, when I was in Vajrayana Institute, and Geshe Jamyang, who was teaching at the time in Chenrezig Institute, there was a weekend coming up, Verses to Incite Weariness with Cyclic Existence. That was so attractive as a title, I had to fly up for the weekend to find out, you know. And it was another composition by Lama Tsongkhapa. So Lama Tsongkhapa very extensively in the Lamrim Chenmo Great Treatise on the Path to Enlightenment, the Middling Lamrim, and then shorter texts such as the Verses to Incite Weariness with Cyclic Existence, the Hymn of Experience, which is, you know, a bit more detailed than something like that very summary of Foundation of All Good Qualities, 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. So many, many, many different presentations of the same thing, well, the same, you know, presented in many different formats from short to extensively. So it's up to us to study extensively. So here, the Four Truths is actually, after we complete these 3 sessions on the outline of the Lamrim, we'll have 4 weeks in February on 4 Truths to go in more elaborately. So we won't go elaborately into that that presentation so much today, but looking at the basis of what we're engaging with here in the middle scope. Okay, this mind, generating a mind of renunciation, to develop uncontrived renunciation, the sort of wish for definite emergence. In other words, I'm sick of samsara, I'm sick of suffering existences and so forth. How do I go about that? So training the mind then, developing insights into reality of each and every phenomenon. And alongside that, joyous enthusiasm, great delight in our ability to be able to see reality as much as we understand that at any point in time. So be enthused to engage in the practice, to do what it takes to practice. So we have to continue to re-enthuse ourselves, as those of you who have been around for a while will know. We all have to do that. And so here, even, you know, studying like the Heart Sutra, we have the, you know, sort of definitive teachings, the explicit teachings of the Heart Sutra on emptiness, which is very much about liberation, how we come to this point of cessation, but also implicitly teaches the 4 truths, you know, the 12 links of dependent arising and so forth. So we can unpack all of that. We'll look at that subsequently. Okay, so for those of sharp faculties, it's said, sharp faculty practitioners, and we all want to be one of those, right? You know, I'll be in the sharp faculty practice. Thank you so much. It means that you have, you know, greater capabilities right now. But we look at how the great sharp intellectual, or, you know, those of sharp intellect practitioners, past practitioners, developed these realizations, developed the realization of reality, developed the realizations of the 4 truths, the middle scope practice, through study, right, through training, through reflection, analytical meditation, and, you know, because we have to develop certainty in those qualities to develop an enthusiasm to practice. So training our mind. So as it says, I practice like this, You who desire liberation should do likewise. So, you know, Lama Tsongkhapa, if we see that the extent to which Lama Tsongkhapa studied, practiced, looked at all the different presentations, all the different points of view, refined his own intellect in that way, his own understanding in that way. And then, as it said, the lesser, those of lesser intellect, doesn't mean people who are stupid, none of us are stupid, but lesser capacity, shall we say, or lesser understanding. That's probably a better way of saying it. You know, we start by developing faith without so much analysis. So we have to first get the teachings because we don't know what we're going to analyze. As we, you know, Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, who was the first Geshe Ma, as I say, to train, German Geshe. She's anyway, so there's a YouTube clip of her explaining her story that when she went to Dharamsala as a teenager or so, or young age, and with her mother, they were having a holiday, right? Went there, and at the end of the holiday, her mother, you know, they were going back to Germany, and she says, no, I'm going to stay and meditate. And so she stayed. Her mother went back. And so she had a retreat place booked up above Tashida. And then she realized, what am I going to meditate on? I have no idea. So she spends 20, 25 years studying. And now she's a Geshe, right? So she tells that as her story. And so this, likewise, we do. Like Lama Tsongkhapa, like Geshe Wangmo, like all the great past practitioners. So we, you know, we start off definitely on a sort of foundation of faith, of trust. We see it as beneficial. That's why people come to the Dharma Center. I want some help, you know, I want some help with these disturbing states. I'm not a happy chappy. That can be a female or male chappy too, by the way. It's a sort of generic chappy, right? So we hear the teachings, we read the texts, and, you know, at the beginning, we don't have much understanding. This is why we're told, we're encouraged. The Buddha said, read the same, listen to the same teaching 100 times. He didn't say read because it wasn't written down at that point, but listen to it 100 times. You know, listen over and over again. So it's very beneficial to develop our faith in that way through knowledge, isn't it? You know, through listening to teachings. And I can sort of look around and know that, you know, quite a few of you here have listened to quite a few, many teachings. You know, many, many teachings, and we're still here, we're still learning. That's why, like, we call ourselves Dharma students. Lama Yeshe called these, you know, actually, we're Hayagriva Buddhist Center. We're not an institute. We've got Vajrayana Institute, Tara Institute, Chenrezig Institute, places of study. So just to, of course, just saying, right? So I think Lama Zopa gave that name, right? I heard Lama Zopa gave a choice of a couple of names in Hayagriva Buddhist Center. Okay. So, you know, we study to gain knowledge because, you know, we don't come from those ancient traditions of Asia. We certainly weren't brought up in the monastic tradition like some of our, you know, our wonderful Geshes and so forth. You know, we maybe didn't grow up in a family that had followed any faith tradition whatsoever, let alone Buddhist. We're not a Buddhist country, right? So we don't have that, you know, we see in our particularly Asian brothers and sisters, that sort of devotion and faith based on that sort of cultural heritage and custom, and you're born into it, right? And so you may not have the teachings, but you've got the devotion. And so it can be harder for us as Australians. I was thinking about that this morning. We're sort of a bit of a larrikin. We have this reputation, or we like to give ourselves this image of ourselves as a larrikin sort of, I don't know, which can be good because it's intellect. And you use that. If you read through the text, it says, you know, commentaries on the Buddha's teachings. Many of the texts that say a qualm arises, a question arises, in other words, and then the response comes, or an objection, great, arises. So this whole tradition in wasn't so much Oh yes, there was the questioning in the Nalanda tradition, the Indian tradition that we study, coming, through Lama Atisha, coming through Shantideva, coming through Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and so forth. So here we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa, looking at all of those views, sort of looking at them from different aspects, and many other views as well. But it was very much in the Tibetan tradition to introduce this style of debate, very physical, and it's got a whole sort of formula to it, and you have to prove this and that, and it's not about not debate Western style where we put the other one down, not at all. No, it's not about that. It's not about, oh, I've got the gift of the gab. It's actually helping the other person to come to the view or to realize any errors in their own reasoning. So it's a win-win in a way, right? The whole system of debate. I don't know if anyone here's observed the debates. Who was at the Guru Bumsong? We had a debate there with the Geshis. Christine was there. That was quite colourful, quite an event. And Geshi's getting up, and up until that point, I had said that the style of debating is a non-contact sport. And I had to revise that when Geshe Zopa just sort of pushed Geshe Sultram out of the way and jumped in. And I went, okay, can't say non-contact sport anymore. Literally. I think he was supposed to be like emceeing or moderating or something, but he just couldn't help himself to jump in. And you would have thought, yeah, that's how they grew up in the debate courtyard doing all this sort of stuff. So, okay, we don't quite have that here. But we can have that, we want to develop that same sharp faculty of our mind. And so what we do have, even though we may not have that sort of, we're not a, didn't grow up in Australia as in a Buddhist culture, at least most of us didn't. Wasn't really, certainly when I was growing up, established, although there were Buddhists in Australia, there wasn't an established tradition of study. There is today, okay, so that's good. But what we do have, and Lama Yeshe picked up on this really early as Westerners, we've got a good intellect. We know how to study. We've got a good education system, and we can use that to good effect, right? So we do use that to good effect. We use that fact, to cultivate. We know how to study. We know what that means when someone says study, we're already trained in that. And you'll hear His Holiness the Dalai Lama again, study, 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 study. I've heard that with my teachers, and I think I'm not studying Geshe, I'm not studying, and then I have to think, well, actually I am. I'm reading, I'm reflecting, I'm raising questions and so forth. I'm not studying in the way they do in the monasteries, but good enough. So each to our capacity, each to our ability and time and enthusiasm and so forth. It grows on you, isn't it? So we need to train even before becoming Buddhist, before taking refuge, any levels of vows, because we have to know what we're signing up for. We have to know, because, once you take a vow, it's like you get into a relationship. It's okay until you've made some commitment to the other person. You can sort of, what do they say? Play the field. But once you've made that commitment, you break that, it's heavy, heavy, heavy. And once you take vows on top, it's even heavier, right? So it's like that breaking it becomes a heavier negative fallout, but maintaining it generates a huge amount of virtue, which is a hidden phenomena of karma. We can't see that. But in actuality, it is true. So we train, before taking any level of vows, and again, looking to Lama Tsongkhapa's example, held all the levels of vows perfectly. So we talked about this a bit with the small scope, because the practice of ethical conduct based on the Vinaya, based on the, sort of teachings of the Buddha, well, as a lay practitioner, as an ordained practitioner, however many level vows that we can take in this lifetime, go for it, as long as we can also be confident that we understand what we're signing up for and that we're able to maintain them. right? So that's crucial. That's crucial. So, you know, we have, if we don't have an understanding as you know, again, the example of Lama Tsongkhapa, if we don't have a correct understanding of study and so forth, and looking at the different commentaries and so forth, even looking at different traditions, then we develop some sort of partial attitude, and we might say, oh, I'm following Tibetan Buddhism. Oh, I'm following Gelugpa. I'm following the middle way consequence school. I have no idea what that means, but I've heard that it's the best one to follow. And it puffs up pride, and we separate ourselves out from others. And this is not how those who we follow practice. I'm not saying they didn't follow those traditions or develop even those, as Lama Tsongkhapa developed that whole tradition. But if you see, like Lama Tsongkhapa studied all the other traditions, all the other, like we look at the Indian traditions, he studied the, you know, sort of all the Nalanda masters, whether it's Baba Viveka, you know, lower school tenets, higher school tenets, and so forth, Nagarjuna, Chandrapurti, so forth. Comments on that in the great treatise on the path to enlightenment, and then also studying within the Tibetan tradition, Kagyu, Sakya, the Kadam tradition, which is the tradition on which then was founded the Gelugpa tradition, which is what we follow, you know, sort of the founding of that by Lama Tsongkhapa. But having investigated all the traditions and learning from all those great scholars. I mean, look at the Buddha. What did the Buddha do? Learn from Hindus, from Brahmins, right? Didn't say, oh, I'm not going to learn from you. He learned as much as he could, and then said, okay, we've got to take this a bit further, right? So Lama Tsongkhapa did the same. Okay, we've got to take this a bit further. Or we've got to be able to investigate where the faults are. Why are we studying that? Because we've got to identify those faults in our own misconceptions and our own mind streams, isn't it? That's where we're going, right? So if it's based on partiality of my tradition, I mean, I was thinking, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama also, like, has had these meetings with the Geshe conferences. I don't know, you know, sort of occasionally, you never sort of really hear that they get together, but this one we heard that the Geshe, this particular Geshe conference, it was quite some years ago, and His Holiness gave the instruction to all the Geshes to not just teach from their own tradition, but to teach the other traditions. And again, Geshe Jamyang went back to Chenrezig Institute and like teaching from Kagyu tradition, teaching from Sakya tradition. Lama Tsongkhapa himself, you know, he had a Sakya teacher who he said was a manifestation of Manjushri. And so, you know, he's not going to say, oh, excuse me, you're Sakya, I'm following the Kadam tradition. No, absolutely not. Hey, you got the goods? I want to know about that. Because he wanted that one-on-one with Manjushri, and he attained that. We see it with the Dalai Lama as well. You know, the Dalai Lama is encouraging this. As I said, you know, with the Geshis, not only that, but, you know, that movie, Dalai Lama Renaissance, I don't know if people have seen, there's two parts, Dalai Lama Renaissance. The first part is, so the director, Kasia Davic, who had the great fortune to host him in Sydney for a while, and he presented the films, and anyway, so the first one was a sort of the documentary. So first one was a coming together of people top of their field in all fields of endeavor, mathematics, education, science, arts, psychology, whatever, coming together. And what His Holiness was interested in, at the end of a week, they presented to His Holiness what are the emerging important features for the future coming out of their traditions, coming out of their areas, their fields of expertise. Fantastic. It's like all the Mind and Life conferences with His Holiness. They're not, it's not coming saying, okay, we're going to look at this from a Buddhist perspective per se. They came from all different faiths or none. Because let's face it, what are we going to do? Most of the world is not, I mean, most of Australia, most of the world is not interested in any sort of religion, you know, the robes could get in the way. And from time to time there are, I mean, it can be beneficial, reminds people of something spiritual, but it can also get in the way. So, but, you know, most people are not interested in that. But what everyone responds to is the kind heart. So those of us engaging in this, oh yes, I want my individual liberation, but not just for myself, as we say in the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. Why? Because I want to become a Buddha. Why? Because I want to benefit everybody. So our heart connection, so combining compassion and wisdom together, these two minds, very powerful, right? As we investigate the afflictive states of mind, the deluded states of mind, the things that propel us, you know, second truth, into these suffering aggregates, these existences, no matter where we are in samsara, it's in the nature of suffering, right? Even in the top of the top God realms, you know, in bliss, and then you come crashing down because you've frittered away all your virtues. So we see His Holiness the Dalai Lama in that Dalai Lama Renaissance. I haven't forgotten that I was talking about. He says, sometimes I catch myself thinking of myself as a Buddhist monk. And we think, oh, what's the problem with that? You are a Buddhist monk. But what's His Holiness saying? Separating myself out, oh, a Buddhist monk does this and that, or maybe even as the Dalai Lama, you know. He never says, I think of myself as a Dalai Lama. He says, people see me as a Dalai Lama. I am told, you know, that's, you know, of course, he's not silly, that's his role, right? And takes it very seriously. But using that role, not to be just Buddhist monk, but to be another human being, as His Holiness says many times recently, I'm another human being on this planet. There's 7.6 billion of that. What connects us is heart connection, right? Isn't it? Even animals, you know, I remember when I was had a, you know, first dog, and you read all the dog training books. It says dogs want love and food in that order, which I found very interesting because I think it was true. You know, I had this little doggie, she was a rescue dog. So I had to earn her trust, right? Because, you know, she'd been on the bad side of the tracks, that was obvious. She had a tough life. Even though I didn't know her backstory, you could tell, right? She was in fear. So the love, because I remember that, you know, they told me, the rescue people said, this is what we've been feeding her, this is her diet. And then it was like, must have been this time of year, Australia Day coming up or one of those things. And I took her to one of those events at the local park, and there was a sausage sizzle. Well, she'd never had sausages. She's like, what are you giving me? Is it poison? You know, right? She learned to like them. I'm just saying. But at the beginning was tentativeness. You know, I need the reassurance. I need the love. I need the affection. I need the care, the concern. Interesting. I think bush turkeys are in a different category. I think they'll take the food first. They don't mind. They don't need the love. Well, of course they do, but you know what I mean. They're very cute. I miss them. So we train like this. And I also thought, you know, His Holiness, that tour and the book, Beyond Religion. Lama Yeshe was onto this in the 80s. He also saw, he said, he introduced like secular ethics, universal education, it was called at that point. Let's get rid of the R word, Lama said. It can get in the way. It can get in the way from our side because we separate ourselves out from others. Let alone within a Buddhist tradition, we separate ourselves out from others. But it can also be beneficial in the way I'm taking on universal responsibility for the benefit of all beings. Then if people of some sort of faith tradition, particularly as Mahayana practitioners or Mahayana believers or aspiring, you know, to practice this path, if I'm not taking on that responsibility for others, what am I doing, you know? And so I've got to develop that compassion. I know this comes along in the next Scott, but just saying that right here, not just mere self-liberation, but holding in mind, and I'm doing this so I attain Buddhahood, so I can liberate all other sentient beings. So we keep our goal, you know, here in the forefront of our mind. And so just like that, the secular ethics, His Holiness has been promoting a lot, more and more and more. Because I think the last census in Australia, right? I don't know, it was the last one, the one before. The last census, I don't know, it was pretty boring. I was really disappointed. Even unless you're a member of the Defence Forces, it seemed you didn't have much you could tell them. I loved the question, can we release your details in 50 years' time or whatever it was? 99 years' time. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be caring about that in 99 years' time. In fact, I don't care about it now, you know, because there's no details here anyway, basically. Did anyone else get disappointed? I was ready to tell them a thing or two and there wasn't much there. Anyway, the one before. What was that?
Not an opportunity.
Not much opportunity for expression except to tick the Buddhist box, you know. Anyway, so those results of those censuses, sensi, whatever they're called, is that more and more, particularly young people, do not identify with any faith tradition whatsoever. We say organised religion, I mean, whether organised or not, you know, any recognised faith tradition, but do identify with a sense of spirituality. So this heart connection is so, so important to our practice right here, you know. So, yeah, the promotion of secular ethics is very, very strong with His Holiness. He's meeting with all people of all faith traditions, so interfaith as well, not having that partial attitude. And this is exactly Lama Tsongkhapa. If you read Lama Tsongkhapa, there's not one sentence that presents a partial attitude. Even the sort of debating of mistaken views is done with that heart of caring concern and love, so that we can all get to a precise understanding of reality, the most refined idea of reality that we can attain, you know, and then put that into practice. So therefore we study. Because, you know, as ordinary beings, you know, once we've got, oh, I don't know about anyone else, but when I went to I first came to the Dharma Centre in Sydney, and you know, the nun, I went to a teaching and then the nun who was there afterwards, discussion, and I'm like, yeah, but just tell me what to do. You know, I just want the definitive, tell me what to do. And I was so frustrated because it dawned on me, there's no, it's just this, you know, because then the mind grasps that, oh, this is the right thing, that's the wrong thing. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. You know, I used to sit in classes with Geshe Samten, and at the beginning, Geshe would lead us in the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. And sometimes I think, he did that 4 times. And it's funny, you know, the mind can think, oh, why did we do 4 times? We're only supposed to do 3. You can do 1,000 times, you can do 1,000,000 times. Well, thankfully you didn't, because then we got some other teachings along the way. But it doesn't matter, does it? Do as many times, but our minds want to grab it. Oh, this is right. Even in the Dharma Centre, we grab it, my Dharma Centre, let alone my tradition and my this. It's good we identify with it, good we feel that this is a place, a home we can come to and you know, be with each other. But it's keeping a very expansive mind, open to investigating, because this is what we have the power to do, from all angles, open to investigating this. You know, if we're talking about liberation, we're talking about understanding the most exquisite understanding, profound understanding of dependent arising, dependent origination, which was, you know, as Lama Tsongkhapa in another text, praise of dependent arising, praise the Buddha for uniquely teaching that, because we get it at a very coarse level. Everything results from causes and conditions. We get it at some level. Even animals get that at some level, you know. You give me food and, you know, and so forth. You're my cause for happiness. Okay, a bit simplistic. But we get this, but we don't get the very subtle level, or at least we don't get how our mind reifies existence, how our mind imputes out there what is actually an inner afflicted state of mind. So we don't identify those inner afflictive states of minds. All right. So this is, how to approach a study, according to, we're following Lama Tsongkhapa's tradition. We want to, as His Holiness says, have as many teachers, read as many teachings, discuss with as many fellow students, debate. For example, the Four Truths, as when I was at Vajrayana Institute, and a fellow student said, "Oh, I've had that teaching on the Four Truths," and she, like, that's it. And sadly, I haven't, I did see her on and off for a few years around the Dharma, sometimes run into her at His Holiness teachings. But now, even a mother doesn't know where she is. It's very sad, right? A mother stayed at the Dharma Center. A mother kept coming, kept coming, kept coming. So we have to, because the more we go along, the more profound our understanding becomes. And particularly when we're talking about the Four Truths, which is the focus of, I keep saying Four Truths. I know, we have the label Four Noble Truths. It's they're truths for those who have that direct perceptual realization of reality. This is self-evident. So Arya beings. So that's where the noble comes in, the Four Truths for the noble Arya beings, right? It's the foundation of all the Buddhist teachings, of all traditions. It's common ground to us all. We might present it with different frames of reference in terms of texts that we study, scriptures that we study, or so forth. And we rely on the great past masters. We rely on each other, our Dharma buddies. We rely on our teachers. We take vows. And through that, on the basis of refuge, on the basis of vows, on the basis of study, reflection, and keeping on, our spiritual progress becomes stable. In other words, we continue to be able to take a step forward, a step forward, a step forward in our understanding, in our reflection, indeed, in our putting it into practice. Ideally in every moment, but, hey, look, we're in here for the long haul. So attaining this liberation already, takes minimum one countless great eons. So relax. Well, don't relax too much. I mean, I always say relax and I think, oh, not too much. It's urgent times. Well, if we have an understanding of karma too, the fact of this, having attained this precious human rebirth on the basis of having practiced the small scope very, very well in past lives, it's self-evident to a Buddha. Maybe not to us, it's hidden, but I have faith in the teachings. I'll take that on that value that, well, we can take it, some sort of understanding of karma. I must have familiarized with this in past lives to have want to come here, because I didn't grow up in a Buddhist family. I mean, we had one Buddhist statue, the sort of laughing Buddha, the fat laughing Buddha, we had that there. But if I asked my parents about it, they couldn't tell me anything except that they brought it back with them when they were in New Guinea. It was interesting, it was in New Guinea, right? You just never know where you're going to pick up your Buddha statues. But they couldn't tell me anything about the Buddhist teachings. They knew nothing, right? So I didn't grow up with that tradition. So the conclusion that I gravitate towards that, not only that I gravitate towards that, I gravitate towards the Gelugpa tradition. I'm not trying to be sectarianism here, but trying to, just looking at, I must have encountered Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings before, Lama Atisha and so forth. Conclusion, right? Let alone get ordained, So there must have been the taking of vows before, there must have been the holding of vows. And this is what they say, the basis of this precious human rebirth is having maintained pure ethics in past lives. We've done that. We can do it again. We've done it before to get these conditions. And in the context of holding vows, whatever levels of vows we've held in the past. And one could posit that we have also studied this in the past. Now, gee, wouldn't it be nice to have all that arising in the mind stream as realizations just like that? But we just never know. The realizations we do have
ripening of past karma. So we do this on the basis of some sort of whatever crude level of understanding of karma that we have, because as the Buddha said to Ananda, only a Buddha knows karma. You know, when the Buddha is said to have said this to Ananda when, you know, there was an old man who wanted to ordain, went to Ananda to request ordination with the Buddha, and Ananda sent him away because he couldn't see any good qualities. Now, Ananda was already a high realized being. Okay. But this guy persisted. Good on him for persistence, right? He didn't take no for an answer. He had a strong motivation to ordain. And so then he went to the Buddha. He got to the Buddha. He got past the gatekeeper of Ananda somehow, maybe on the day off, and then got to the Buddha. And the Buddha accepted him for ordination and said to Ananda, gave him a ticking off, only a Buddha knows karma. Because what could the Buddha see that Ananda couldn't see? Ananda saw the qualities of this gentleman fronting up in this life. The Buddha saw the past lives, however many past lives, because given that, what, you know, our understanding of karma, what is one of the aspects, good and bad, karma multiplies. So the result is greater than the cause. So however long that it had been in his mind stream up until then. So what was in his mind stream? That in some previous life, I'm sure many of you have heard about this, he was a fly. I mean, we were all flies in previous lives, probably many times. But in this particular life, he was a fly on a bit of cow dung on a cart that was going around a stupa. So as a fly, you have no idea what a stupa is, right? But we take our animals, maybe not the flies, but we take our animals around the stupa. I mean, hopefully the flies fly around the stupa, or at least see a stupa. But the imprint of that, even though the fly didn't know what that was, had that virtuous, we say, from the power of the object, seeing a Buddha image, seeing a stupa, so forth, had multiplied, and all the conducive conditions had come together in that one life for him to go to the Buddha and request ordination, right? We haven't got a clue. Ananda didn't even have a clue about that. So we just never know somebody else's backstories. We hardly know our own. Well, we don't, you know, we don't know most of this life. We can't recall, let alone past lives. So forget it, you know, but not forget it. We will over time by pacification of our mind. So cultivating a mind of loving concern for others is in sync with reality. So we get enthused to take that into our practice in this middle scope practice. So combining the mind of loving concern for others with the view of emptiness is such a powerful combination to familiarize our mind with, to allow that to grow our understanding, to remove the afflicted states of mind that separate us, every single one. If we check up, every single one of those separates us out from that connection with others, because we impute out there. And, you know, when it's anger or so forth, the blame is on, you know, out there, not the fact that it's the anger arising in my own mind stream. The person I previously loved did something that I didn't like, and so now I've made them public enemy number one in a nanosecond. We do it, don't we? I mean, maybe not as dramatic as that, but check our minds of when a disturbing state of negative talk arises in our mind. We have to check up, you know, as it says in the 8 verses of thought transformation, vigilant. A moment a delusion arises in my mind. Any moment a delusion arises in my mind. I mean, we could be very busy checking up, isn't it? If we check up, we could be very busy checking up, and this is what the Buddha said to do. The moment a delusion arises in my mind, why? Because I have some sort of understanding of karma, that karma multiplies. And so in that negative mind state, forget about the one who ordained, okay, that's virtue ripening. But the non-virtue, I don't want that to ripen. Thank you very much. I've just said I've had enough of all these suffering existences. I don't want any more. Thank you very much. So if I have the understanding that the moment that arises, I'm in danger, then the practice of mindfulness, the practice of great caution, the practice of alertness, carefulness, careful to maintain, to take vows, maintain vows, but care for my mental hygiene, right? So we have to be very, 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 a moment a delusion arises in my mind, to confront and avert it without delay, applying the powers of purification. So there's one aspect of the third truth of cessation, to be able to look at each and every one, antidote, or we don't have to look at each and every one, 84,000. I was going to say there's a shortcut, but it takes a long time. We can chip away while we're working on the long time. But we identify the specific affliction arising in the mind, and then we have to identify like how it manifests. How do I know anger arises? How do we know? Well, I get hot and bothered, or get heart palpitations. I've never noticed the blood rushing to the wrists or the feet, I have to say. Particularly the hands, isn't it? Because you're getting ready to box, to fight, apparently. But I've just never noticed that one. But I have noticed heat, you know, but particularly the mental heat, isn't it? And then the negative thoughts come and go, oh, I know you. I know you really, really well. Nip it in the bud, nip it in the bud. As soon as we can shine the line of awareness to be able to nip that in the bud and know that there are, to each and every one of those, we have to know the appropriate antidote, isn't it? What's the appropriate antidote for anger? Anger that makes all my problems be you out there, or somebody, or something. Now, antidote is actually drawing that one closer. Love, caring concern, and patience. Because you think a mind, if anger is a form of impatience, anger makes our whole demeanor look pretty awful, ugly, distasteful. I mean, if somebody's coming to the door and they're fuming with anger, we don't even have to wait till a word comes out their mouth. We all take a collective step back because we feel that energy. True? We feel, oh, you know, maybe, you know, oh, you're in a bad mood today. Oh, I think I'll stay away. You know, when we retract, right? We know that. We don't want the fallout. But if a mind of love, look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Look how many beings, they don't have to be Buddhist, attracted. And so those of us on the Mahayana path, we want to attract beings to us. So and then it's a matter of saying, what is attractive in that being? Each and every one. To see them as attractive. Each and every one has been my mother in past lives. Of course, you know, we have an investigation of that in the great scope, but feeling that sense of connection on the basis of dependent arising. I'm dependent on them for my survival. You know, whatever aspects we take. So, you know, the practice of these practices of patience and so forth come along when we look at, particularly at the great scope, the perfections, you know, of the bodhisattva practice. But we always want love. We always want affection. So it's growing more and more, you know, this in our mind. And applying that when we start to investigate the fact of cyclic existence, how we investigate. So I wanted to read some from His Holiness the Dalai Lama at Harvard. He says, how do we investigate? It's difficult. Yes. There is a continuum of mental and physical aggregates our body and mind, that are under the influence of contaminated actions, karma, and afflictive emotions, our delusions, so second truth, that propel existence. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to be reading, I'm commenting. And that serve as a basis of suffering. This is cyclic existence. There is a continuum of mental and physical aggregates that are under the influence of contaminated actions and afflictive emotions that serve as the basis of suffering, and this is cyclic existence. If I want to be free of that, I have to identify what it is I want to be free of. In order to establish its existence, one first has to understand how these mental and physical aggregates come to be a basis of suffering by way of former actions, our past karma. How is it that I manifested into this form? How is it being manifest in a cockroach form or a hell being form or a predator being? So we investigate the fact of all the realms of cyclic existence are in the nature of suffering. And then we look at, more in depth, the three categorizations into 3, into 6, into 8, and so forth, and then all the afflictions, and we go, unpack. But the basis of which, no matter where you're born in samsara, and the basis of refuge of the small scope is not wanting the suffering of lower realms. So here we say, actually, anywhere in cyclic existence, any cyclic existence itself means suffering, right? Suffering of body, suffering of mind, different forms of suffering, different levels of suffering, different heaviness of suffering. So we have to understand how these mental and physical aggregates come to be a basis of suffering by way of former actions. To do this, one must understand how contaminated actions and afflictive emotions come to be. One must understand how an unbroken continuum of such exists. So on the basis of our mind, our mental continuum going back since the beginning of his past lives is why the Buddha was able to perceive all his own past lives and then the past lives of others, because of being able to track back, not just within one lifetime, but further and further into more and more lives. If one were logically proving the existence of cyclic existence, one would state these reasons to logically prove the existence of cyclic existence. One would state these reasons, which then would have to be established individually, right? So this complexity that the Buddha understands why this particular conglomeration of not just one karmic imprint, but many, many coming together, and then the conditions coming together, secondary conditions coming together. So the contaminated actions and afflictive emotions exist in general, that these have a connection with our mind and with our experience of pleasurable and painful effects. According to our karma, could be the same thing. One person experiences as pain, one person experiences pleasure. That there is an unbroken and beginningless continuum of consciousness between lives, that the mental and physical aggregates that are impelled by contaminated actions and afflictive emotions. In other words, we call this our throwing karma that brings us into this existence, the continuum of which has existed unbrokenly from lifetime to lifetime. Sometimes when babies are born, people say, oh, that's an old soul. Well, we're all old souls, if you want to use soul, where we can debate soul, but we've all been here before. Many, many times. They all have a nature of suffering and serve as a basis for suffering. So when I was, I don't know what age, anyway, at some point, my mother got involved in doing local histories and oral histories and investigations like that in her later life. And one year she presented us all with our own family tree and all that investigation, right? To investigate our family. And on the front was, you've got a family shield and a family motto, right? I don't know if anybody else has received one of these or has one of those, but this is a sort of probably English tradition, I'm not sure. Anyway, there we had the shield and the motto, learn to suffer. And I thought, great. And then I met the Dharma and I thought, actually, it's right, isn't it? Learn that it is in the nature of suffering. And so it's like, okay, thanks, I can reframe that. The Buddha said we can reframe everything. It's just a matter of our mind, you know. This is the teaching of the first aspect of the first truth of impermanence. Everything's subject to change. Because of emptiness, everything is possible. Because of emptiness, everything arises as conditionality, depending on causes and conditions. Therefore, change is possible. Otherwise, there'd be no point. We just have to say, oh, well, how long have I got? How many years am I living? You know, this is it. Just got to live it out. But we know that's not true. We know in this life, how much have we learned in this life, right? In any field of endeavor, we have superb intellect. We have limitless potential of the mind. That's the good news. So, anywhere in samsara, nature of suffering, the aggregates, and serve as a basis for suffering, and that the root of all this meets back to a mistaken awareness which perceives the nature of phenomena wrongly. So as the Buddha said, this is the deluded, the afflicted state of mind that is totally out of sync with reality, because anything in sync with reality, this is why we use that loving concern, compassion. These are indeed our virtues, our positive qualities are in sync with reality. Anything disturbing to the mind, any afflicted state of mind, is not in the nature of reality. Interesting, isn't it? So it can be removed. So it's not the nature of mind to be disturbed. Have we familiarized with that? Very well, thank you very much. In many different multifaceted ways. Absolutely, got that one nailed. Once it is established that these thoroughly afflicted phenomena are generated with mistaken consciousness as their root. So once we get that, to whatever level we get that, because the more we go along, the more we get it, you know. But at the first we hear it and go, is that true? And that's good. You know, we investigate. It can be understood that when this mistaken consciousness is removed, the afflictive emotions generated in dependence on it are also removed. So it's like when you call the poison hotline, you've got to get the right antidote. It's this particular snake or spider or whatever that bit me. Some other thing is not going to help, you know. So I've got to get the right one. So, and that way, that suffering can be removed and the antidote can be applied, whereby the contaminated actions generated in dependence on them are also removed. Through that, ultimately, we want to remove the totally ignorant, you know, this ignorance based on a view of the perishing aggregates, this body and mind as me, and all that comes along with that, you know, as something being inherently existent, truly existent, existing by way of its own side, by way of its own characteristics. And all these different ways of explaining that are to refute all the wrong views that can arise in our minds. We have to unpack. Why does the Buddha say this and this and this and this and this? Why use so many terms for the same thing? It's different aspects. Because as Lama Tsongkhapa presented with the, you know, middle way consequence school, as following in the tradition of Nagarjuna and so forth, the most subtle view of dependent arising is that we merely impute that, which brings us back to the point of His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying, I merely imputed Buddhist monk. I can be imputed human being, I can be imputed male, I can be imputed monk, I can be imputed whatever I impute. But that not to believe that label is something concrete, is something out there from its own side. It's a mere label, a mere imputation of my mind. Because what do we do on the basis of that imputation? We elaborate all sorts of stories, we hallucinate. I love the Castle, right? Michael Caton. People, maybe some people have seen the Castle. You're dreaming. It's exactly that, the Buddha says. You're all dreaming. Wake up. That's what being a Buddha means. It means being fully awake to reality, being fully in sync with reality, having removed all these afflictions, all these veils of the mind, having a very fine-tuned understanding of reality, not to rely on conceptual thought, which gets us into trouble. We also need conceptual thought to apply reasoning according to the middle way consequence school, or the very fine forms of reasoning that we use to counteract these afflictive states of mind until we get to the truth. And once we get to that, abide there, and until we get that direct perceptual realization of reality as it is, not as our mind hallucinates, not fabricated, unfabricated, uncontrived, just completely in the zone, if you like, completely. That is liberation from what? From, it's a cessation of all the afflictive obscurations so that they never arise again. That's where we want to arrive at. That is what freedom is. But along the way, we can have choice. Along the way, we can see the possibilities of that. You know, and one example that sticks with me, I trained as a Feldenkrais practitioner. That's a by the way. But in the context of that training, the guy who was leading the training, and I was helping at the time, it was a long time ago, in the 80s, setting up the Australian Feldenkrais Guild. So I had a few roles there in helping to set that up. And I was sort of like not a formal assistant of his, but I was helping out. And I could just see one day he came up to me, and he's a, you know, American. I said was, and I thought he might be still alive. I have no idea. Checked out. One of our other trainers, she passed away last year, but he was younger than her, so I don't know. I have to check up if he's still alive. Anyway, this particular day, he came up, and he was sort of like, how Americans can be very smooth operators. No, he's, you know, he was very, he was just like, very polite. I don't know if you've encountered this. It's sort of people very polite. I'm not talking about, you know, the rat bags. We've got rat bags everywhere, but, you know, very, very polite. And get this, negative state of mind. He's coming up to ask me to do something. And my negative state of mind, I could feel myself, even though metaphorically crossing my arms. Yeah, Frank, what do you want? You know, and I could feel the tightness coming. And then I wasn't yet following the Buddhist path. I'd had some teachings, but not enough had stuck yet. I hadn't investigated at all, so I hadn't done any study whatsoever. I just sort of like went along occasionally for a feel-good feeling. Well, it's a hook. Anyway, so this, and then I thought, I don't have to think like that. I can drop that. That thought arose, and I experienced what might be called this form of bliss. Wow, I was so enthralled that I didn't have to follow this negative thought. I was just like, that feels good. So we know that experience, right? And we might know it in meditation, and it might not stick yet, but we know that, and we know that's where it's at. Having that choice, having that gap between that habituation towards a negative thought arising and actually following it through and letting it fester and grow, and, you know, till I'm fighting with Frank over what? I mean, I was there to help. He was asking me to help, and my mind just sort of pops up with this ridiculous thought. Thankfully, it was so ridiculous I could nip it in the bud, because sometimes we're so trained to those, they're so heavy in our mind, we can't see their absurdity. Isn't it true? We really don't get it. Yeah, haven't got the end of this quote yet. Okay. Once it is established, these thoroughly afflicted phenomena are generated with a mistaken consciousness as their root. That was my example. It can be understood that when this mistaken consciousness is removed, okay, it was for that moment, I'm not saying it never occurred again, the afflictive emotions generated in dependence upon it are also removed. So we chip away until they're, remove, whereby the contaminated action generated in dependence upon them are also removed. Through that, birth in cyclic existence that is produced in dependence upon contaminated actions is overcome once we attain that direct perceptual realization of emptiness. That is the antidote to all those afflictions. So we don't have to go one by one by one by one by one. We do meantime have to go one by one, but at the same time working at the long term, uprooting the ignorance that propels absolutely every form of suffering that we have, every problem we experience, nothing to do with anyone out there. So we have to own responsibility, which is sort of like, we've got to grow up, own responsibility. In this way, the 12 branches, the 12 links, dependent arising of cyclic existence are overcome. So in the Sangata Sutra, it says, are you done coming to Jambudvipa? Yes, please. Jambudvipa, this world system. And it's all very well for me to put up my hand, but then I've got to do the work. As an inner being, I've got to say, okay, if I'm got that weariness of cyclic existence, in other words, done coming to Jambudvipa, this world system, or any world system, then how do I get out of it? One time at Vajrayana Institute, Lama Geshe Samten was going to do a teaching on samsara and nirvana, and I called it Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, because I grew up in musicals and there was a musical called Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, and it did it for me. And he's like, I didn't call it that. So I had to uncall it that, because it was my deluded mind. It wasn't precise, right? But I just thought it might get people in the door. Guess I wasn't having a bar of it. Very sharp intellect. And that's what I need, counteract all my sort of, oh, that would be nice if we called it that. Yeah, okay. Overcome everything. It is through such a combination of understandings one can gain ascertainment with respect to the process of cyclic existence. So this is one of the things we study. We investigate okay, it's all very well to say my past karma, and okay, I practiced stainless prayers in the past, and particularly at the time of death, made those stainless prayers to attain a human rebirth, had my, good mental state, practiced the perfections, particularly perfection of generosity, practiced the perfection of ethics, maintained vows, arrived here with all the conditions to practice, to study. This is, I've got all the conditions today. And I've still got, a mind that's functioning reasonably, as a foundation to be able to continue to study and practice. Don't know how long that's going to last, sickness, aging, death. So, that I've got to understand what are the causes for that, because that's what I want to keep on having. But what are also the causes that hinder that lead me into other realms of suffering existence? So we investigate, each of the 12 links of dependent arising, how they interrelate to each other over a cycle of lifetimes and propel us lifetime to lifetime into these endless existences. And as His Holiness says, it's not something that can be explained all in one piece. In other words, we've got to thoroughly investigate. And looking at, the manifestations of karma, the different types of karma, the virtuous karma, non-virtuous karma. How do we know it? Sort of the throwing karma that propels existence, the karma, the things that we experience, our experiences, as it said, you know, the way that karma is manifested in this life from my past actions or previous lives of experiences similar to the cause. So if I engage, you know, I might have taken vows of not killing, and then I don't uphold that vow, or I don't realize the karmic fallout of killing. And so then I experience, you know, living in a place where maybe medicines aren't effective, or, you know, I don't get nutrition from the food. I have causes for a short life, chronic illnesses, so forth. Or the result, similar to the cause, even worse, is I keep killing. So I'm born in a lion body or a whale body, or, you know, I become a killing machine. So we have to all investigate and think, yeah, but I don't go around willy-nilly killing, but we have to sort of check our mind in that direction. Or we can check our mind with, you know, to investigate the results of all the different actions, you know, when we say, you know, when we take those vows of no killing, no stealing, no lying, no sexual misconduct, no intoxicants, and so forth. And just on the sexual misconduct one. So again, it's like taking vows, you know, you're in a committed relationship, or you're married or in a committed relationship. And if you maintain respect in that, and respect for the other person, and, you know, over many years, you know, maintain a healthy relationship, of course, subject to change all the time. It's those of you in long-term relationships, or, you know, it's hard work. It's a lot of work, you know. I think Lama Yeshe would say, you get one neurotic person together with another neurotic one, what do you expect? But also I was thinking just this morning, there's one couple at Tara Institute. Normally monks and nuns don't engage in marriage ceremonies and so forth, because it's not coming from the Buddha's tradition. But Lama Yeshe married this couple, you know, gave them the vows, and or however it worked. And I remember talking to one of them who said, because Lama married us, and because of their devotion to Lama, they realized they had to stay together. They're still together. They're happily married. It's not saying they haven't had to work over the decades on that, absolutely. But what a wonderful motivation to have. You know, it's a very pure motivation of following the guru. It's like following the teacher's advice, getting the blessings of that. How wow is that? But then if we cheat on the partner or with another one, we know that causes, I mean, we don't have to, I mean, just read the headlines. Oh, dude, you never thought that would hurt anybody? It hurts absolutely everybody. But what we don't see is the karmic fallout of that. That then, you know, your experiences, and they say, if you want to know the results of your past karma, look at how your life is now. Things like you can't maintain relationships. You can't maintain employees. You're born into an environmental karma, where it's filthy, or, you know, doesn't, you know, food's contaminated, so forth. So we investigate and look at all the aspects of, well, I don't want that existence. And that can motivate us to then, you know, follow pure vows, just like Lama Tsongkhapa and so forth. As Nagarjuna said, whoever was once reckless may later become scrupulous. They are then as comely as the cloudless moon, just like Nanda, Angula Mala, Aja Shatru, and Shankara, all of whom, you know, engage in like Anguli Mala. So Anguli is like thumb or finger, and Mala, you know, the thread. And so he killed 999 people and took their trophies, you know, had a thread of thumbs or whatever. Sometimes it says thumb, sometimes it says finger. That was his trophy. And because he was following this wrong path, to say the least. And it was just like, I just got to get that last 1,000, you know, I've got to make the 1,000. And the Buddha came along. He used to hijack people, right? And so then the Buddha came along, And he says, stop. And he couldn't keep up with the Buddha. And eventually he called out, why do you keep running away? I mean, you could logically, as an ordinary being, saying, thank you very much, I don't want to be killed and I don't want to end up a thumb around your waist. But he said, I stopped running a long time ago. You know, and with that, Angulimala, you know, obviously had the virtue arising in his mind to be able to then recognize virtue when he was face to face with it and prostrated to the Buddha, and the rest is history. You know, follow the teachings. Like that. So when we unpack that, we also look at the different, because just think, if he'd killed a Buddha, that would be heavy. Well, they say you can't actually kill a Buddha, because a Buddha manifests whatever form is beneficial. You can kill the form, but you can't actually kill a Buddha. You know. They say, you know, that immediate retribution of drawing blood from a Buddha with malicious intent. So we have to unpack and understand all of these. And then the heaviness of the karma, you know, the ones of immediate retribution, that means without the intervention of another lifetime, you go into the hellish existences of killing your father, killing your mother, an Arya being. And how do we know who's an Arya being? Just say hands off. Right? Causing a split amongst the Sangha. So those who are, it's hard to even say, bad-mouthing the Dalai Lama, for example, and so forth. It's hard to even say those words, you know, but it's happening. You know, causing that divisiveness. And you just got to say, oh, the negative karma of that is heavy, let alone, I mean, you can debate with the Dalai Lama. I think Tenzin Palmo's had a few debates with the Dalai Lama about full ordination, and good on it, you know, healthy debate. We're encouraged, but not disparaging the other. It's a big difference, isn't there? And then, you know, in terms of the heaviness of the object, but the heaviness of that mind. So a slight irritation is not full on rage, is it? No. But what really propels our cyclic existence is this attachment energy, attachment to having a body, desire energy, attachment to other bodies. So when we do an antidote or meditation for overcoming that sort of desire, and we meditate on the ugliness of the object of attraction, be it a chocolate or be it a, I mean, if you wanted to give up chocolate, I mean, if you're not, go for it. You know, just saying. I was trying to use an innocuous object. But also on the body of a person you're attracted to, you're not trying to develop a mind of aversion to that, but realizing that you're imputing all sorts of qualities onto that person that are not existing out there. It's coming from your mind. And if you're in that committed relationship and you don't want to cheat on the partner, I say, even your thought going to that, it doesn't completely cut that vow, but you're in dangerous, tricky water, isn't it? Because then a friend of mine, she wasn't Buddhist, but she had a sex addiction. She said she was in a loving, well, she was in a relationship, loving or otherwise. She was in a long-term relationship, but she was doing an online thing. It's just like, well, I'm not actually doing it. I'm just doing it online. Well, actually you are. Especially when she told me how many hours she was doing it for in a day. Obsession. That's where it goes unchecked. You know, we had one of the guys in the prison project when I first went to Cessnock prison. And he said, can you lead that a meditation to overcome sexual urge in a prison environment? You can see how that's necessary. But I did sort of check up, look around the room to see, okay, I knew he was genuine. So I thought, regardless, by the time we get through this meditation, even though anyone's got sexual urges in here, they're all going to be dampened down. You know, once you go into all the grossities of the body and peel it all apart, and then you realize, actually, my body's the same. So it's not about, you know, trying to have a distaste for another person, but just realizing my mind's imputing all of this. Right? And to counteract that mind, that elaborates on top of what is there, what isn't there. And then more and more we get to that more in sync with reality. Any questions, comments? Susan? With what? With His Holiness?
With His Holiness.
Dalai Lama in Harvard.
Oh.
That was a quote from Dalai Lama in Harvard, which itself is, I mean, that itself is interesting. You know, when Kandrila was in Australia, and she would get people to read, you know, Claire, the translator, would say, the advice, they'd come out and say the advice was to read Dalai Lama in Harvard. And I'm like, no, sorry. Oh, I've destroyed the punchline now. The book was Tibetan Culture and Traditions or something like that, was the translation into English from the Tibetan. And I'm like, I wonder what book that is. I don't know that book. And so, because people were saying, have we got that book here? Can you give me that book? And I'm like, don't know it. And then later, Geshe Lakpa from the Tibetan Works and Archives was visiting Vajrayana Institute. And I was telling him this, and he said, I saw it in your library. It's on the bookshelf. And I'm like, show me. And he showed me, and it was Dalai Lama in Harvard. And I said, so why was it called Tibetan? He says, oh, that's on the Tibetan version. They just put whatever English title, you know. So this magic book, you know, was this one. So another imputation. It's just, we just merely labeled it that, okay, relax. At least we found out when it end what book it was to give people. Okay. All right, shall we leave it there? I mean, time says yes, but I think if it's any other, oh yes, it is. It's 12 o'clock. Oh. Okay, so middle scope, and as I said, we'll unpack that one further with the Four Truths when we look into that in more detail. So just to read that again, if you do not put effort, so this is the hymn of experience. If you do not put effort into contemplating true sufferings of faults of cyclic existence, you will not develop the wish for liberation. If you do not contemplate true origins, the steps for entering cyclic existence, you will not understand how to cut the roots of cyclic existence. Therefore, rely on weariness. We have to know the correct weariness. With the weariness, we could say, which is definite emergence, the wish, definite emergence from existence, and cherish the knowledge of what binds you. Cherish the knowledge of what binds you to cyclic existence. Now that makes sense, because it's just like, why would I want to cherish that? The knowledge of that. Cherish the knowledge that binds you to cyclic existence. A yogi practice like this, you who desire liberation should do likewise. And Lama Tsongkhapa can say that confidently as someone who attained liberation. So it's like, okay, he's saying how to practice. I practice like this. I assure you, you practice like this, just like the Buddha said, you will attain the result. So we'll leave it there. Next week, great Scott. Do you have any announcements? Oh, the Lamrim, yeah, we were talking about that. Is that from America? Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, you know, because yes, they're offered freely by Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, right? But, you know, there's postage and all of that sort of business. So. Great. Okay, so if you want that, daily reflections on Lamrim, it takes you through the whole year, piece by piece. Beautiful.
Just clarify, Sunday morning teachings are basically based on discovering Buddhism. Okay.
Yes, they're the Discovering Buddhism topic. So we started with number 1, and then we're going to have the following week actually introduction again to the whole thing, because I think we're sort of all a bit caught unawares last year. Now people have it taught. So it will, so unpacking like what that, it's a 2-year program and explaining all of that will be on the 23rd. And then it goes on to the other modules of Discovering Buddhism, which is a foundation program, but at whatever level we are, we just sort of deepen our awareness. So it's not like, oh, I've done the, like my friend who said, oh, I've done the 4 truths, oh, I've done the foundation level. So everyone's welcome to come along and say, and drop in at any time. Yeah. I mean, the beauty of the Discovering Buddhism is that, yes, there are standalone, of course, it follows through the Lam Rim, actually. It unpacks the Lam Rim. You do all the foundational, you know, which is why the mind and its potential and how to meditate, and then it's presenting the Lam Rim, and then it's like going through in greater depth on each aspect of the Lam Rim. So that's how it moves forward. But one can attend, drop in, or it's not like you have to do the whole thing, because, you know, it unpacks over a 18 months to 2 years in terms of, because I say to 2 years, because the last module is personal practice, which most people take a very long time to do. But anyway, well, it does take a long time to do, but yeah, which is why we say 2 years. But the 13 modules that are, the content is really all unpacking more and more the Lam Rim, more detail. So it's, everyone's welcome. And of course, then there's, you know, that it's also offered online on FPMT, and it's also, if one were at some future stage able to travel at different centres, it's also offered. Maybe one day we'll travel again. I mean, yes, you predicted there'll be a time we can't travel, and that's, yeah, interesting, isn't it? Okay, so let's dedicate. Thank you. So we'll go to page 16. I think we could do it in English. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And then over to the long life prayers for our precious Gurus. Pray for the long life of His Holiness Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then skipping over page 22, long life prayer for Kyabje Zopa Rinpoche. You who uphold the seduous moral way, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all sustaining, preserving and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honouring the 3 jewels, saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And see, even with this iteration into English, has been changed, because Rinpoche said the 3 jewels, we don't want to make it sound worldly, like literally it's correct, but it said 3 rare sublime ones to remind us the Buddha Dharma Sangha are precious, rare, sublime, supreme, so forth. Just saying. Long life prayer for Tenzin Osul. Lord of Dhamma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme, O Lama, please, please live long. Thank you very much. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day, week.